MMOs, or massively multiplayer online games, have been around since the 1980s in one form or the other, and still continue to enjoy a fair amount of popularity today. That said, some of the most played games in the world today are not MMOs, but games with a much smaller scale like MOBAs or arena shooters. MMOs have always demanded a lot of time and money from their players. Money might not be a huge issue for some people, but time is certainly a valuable commodity that most people don't give to new games so easily, which is why it is much harder for newer players to start playing MMOs. In a lot of cases, once you get past the learning curve, some MMOs can provide a very rewarding gameplay experience, which explains their continuing popularity. Take World of Warcraft for instance. It's been online since 2004, and while it is long past its peak popularity, it still has millions of players paying a subscription merely to play the game, not to mention buying the expansions separately when they release. Another popular example is Final Fantasy XIV Online. The first version of this MMO was actually a flop and had to be shut down, but in its current version, it is considered to be one of the best MMOs of our times. Apart from these two titles, very few MMOs actually charge a monthly fee these days. Instead, they rely on expansions and microtransactions to support their infrastructure. It is also becoming more and more difficult to categorize MMOs these days because not all of them have the same feature set. For example, games like Warframe and Destiny 2 allow you to interact with multiple people in common social spaces. Is this enough to categorize them as MMOs? They don't feature activities that can fit more than a dozen or more people at the same time. So are they really massively multiplayer games, or are they merely smaller MMOs? What about Battle Royale games? They usually feature 100 or more players on the same map in a single game. But these games are more of a match-based activity rather than giving you the freedom to roam around a map and do whatever you want. Can Battle Royale games be called MMOs too? No matter the terminology, it is clear that MMOs have had a strong influence on the kind of games people play today. Multiplayer games, whether in small groups or large, are very attractive to many people because they view gaming as a social activity, something to be shared with friends. I have never really invested a lot of time into MMOs, but I do appreciate their contribution to the growth of the gaming community. In this video, let's take a brief tour of 5 MMOs, all of which provide a different experience compared to each other. First up is of course World of Warcraft. Running since 2004, this evergreen title is often the first name that comes to mind when you hear the term MMO. It is still going strong and even has a classic variant now, which lets you experience a part of how it was like playing the original 2004 release. Due to its complexity, it has never been ported over to consoles, although every few years there are rumors of a console port coming soon. Next up is Final Fantasy XIV Online. After the initial version was shut down due to performance issues, this revitalized version has been running successfully since 2013 and has entertained millions of players since then. More notably, it is also available on consoles, with the PlayStation version available since day one and an Xbox version coming sometime later in 2024. Next, we have the Elder Scrolls Online. On paper, this seemed like a sure hit, coming after the success of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. However, the launch of this MMO was not exactly smooth, partly because it launched in 2014 with a monthly subscription, which wasn't the best idea. Sure, people were still paying subscription fees for World of Warcraft, but they were not so enthusiastic to do the same for a new MMO. So by 2015, the monthly subscription was dropped and the game instead switched to a model that included expansions, microtransactions, and an add-on subscription that was completely optional, called ESO Plus. It gradually built up its audience and now has a healthy player base. This MMO is available on both major consoles as well as PC. Then comes Guild Wars 2. Originally released in 2012 with a buy-to-play model, this MMO switched to a free-to-play model in 2015 and remains one of the few popular MMOs to follow this model. It may not be universally recognized as World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy, but Guild Wars 2 has its own dedicated player base and firmly takes its place among the most played MMOs today. Finally on the list we have New World, and I have only included it here because of how new it is. The game released in 2021 with a buy-to-play model and no subscription required. It got off to a good start partly due to its impressive visuals, but failed to capitalize on it as players found it to be too grindy and uninteresting. It has since released one paid expansion which received decent reviews but still has a mixed score on Steam. New World is a perfect example of how tough it can be to break into the MMO market these days, because core fans of the genre seem uninterested in leaving their favorite MMOs and starting all over again with a new one. Meanwhile, modern players don't seem to be interested to invest time into an MMO due to the learning curve involved. These 5 titles offer a good representation of the genre, which seems to be stagnant and active at the same time. Apart from the huge risk of not finding an active player base, there's also the risk of the high cost of maintaining the technical infrastructure required to support huge numbers of players on the same server. That is probably why we rarely see breakout hits in the genre and instead settle for smaller scale MMOs which are relatively cheaper to support. It's hard to predict what the future will look like for MMOs, but just like any other game, the servers will probably stay on until there are enough active players. Thanks for watching and see you in the next episode.